Welcome back, everyone. I hope you were just as excited as I was for The Walking Dead to return.
I haven't been this excited since I abused those caffeine pills to get ready for the big show.
Now, the Whisperers story arc is one of my favorite in the comics, and I cannot wait to give you all the insights. Buckle up, put on your zombie mask, and stay tuned. This episode covered 3 different stories. We have Negan, Daryl and his group, and Alden with Luke. Being a review of this episode, there shouldn't be any spoilers, but in case you haven't watched the mid-season premiere, what are you doing watching this? Go watch that. Turn it off. Go watch that. But before you go, hit that like button, the little thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't already. Speaking of subscribe, if you haven't subscribed already, you can do that by clicking the button down there. Now, I don't get paid for these videos, and so your shares and views are kind of what I consider my payment. So picking up where the first half left off, Negan sees his cell was wide open and makes off on the slowest escape in history. Under the cover of complete darkness, he somehow gathers his supplies consisting of a shovel, a compass, and a bag of tomatoes, and makes it to the wall just in time for complete daylight. As he tries to climb over, he's greeted with the barrel end of Rick's revolver. Feeling sorry for him, Judith allows him to leave and off he goes on his adventure. In search of sanctuary, he makes a few stops, including a clothing store. Okay, when he saw that sign that said leather goods, who wasn't hoping to see him find another leather jacket? You know, kind of like this one here, am I right? I think I'll do the rest of the episode in this jacket. It just feels so right. Alas, after getting into a brief dogfight, he finds a new leather jacket, but not the one that made him famous. Fun fact, the clearing where Negan throws up is the same clearing where he was first introduced and is kneeling in the same spot as Abraham was when he was killed. He makes it home sweet home.
Home sweet home.
Only to find it in ruins, all of his people dead, or undead if you would.
Big Richie, is that you?
Even trying to make it a new home with old friends, things don't quite work out for him.
This just ain't working out.
Realizing there's nothing for him out there, he heads back to Alexandria where he's greeted by Judith warmly, who escorts him back to his cell. Okay, so the whole Negan cell and his escaping was inspired by 2 separate events in the comics. The first part is his cell is actually left unlocked. In the comics, it's Olivia, not Gabriel, who forgets to lock his cell. Well, kind of forgets. And this is done after she gives him a bath and a haircut. The biggest change though, in contrast to AMC's version, is that he actually never leaves his cell. Rick comes back to check on him, only to be greeted by Negan nonchalantly sitting in his cell with the door wide open. He explains he did this stunt to try to start the process of building trust between them. Assuring him that it will never happen, Rick locks the door and heads out, but not before being scolded. So the second part seems to have inspired AMC, but not taken directly from the comics for it. Negan eventually does escape his cell in the comics, but this happens much later than where the show is at. After the war with the Whisperers has already started, a man named Morton, who lost his family to the Whisperers, blames Rick for his loss and tries to kill him. During the struggle, his accomplice Vincent decides not to go through with it and tries to stop Morton. During their fight, Rick finds his chance and kills Morton, zombie style. Sometime later, his son Brandon, angry at Rick for killing his dad, goes down and springs Negan from his cell. His goal is to use Negan to help him get to the Whisperers so he can inform them of Rick's plan of forming a militia. I don't want to get too far into it, but let's just say Brandon's plan and Negan's plan don't exactly line up. Another thing to point out, Negan eventually does return to Alexandria to turn himself in, and even though he has a gun pointed at him just like the show, no shots are taken. He also finds his lost Lucille, who was picked up by Dwight, and he vows to get her back. Kind of like this one right here. It's kind of cool. I might just do the rest of the show in full Negan getup. All I need is a little scarf. Now, I should also point out that Negan's escape in the comics have a direct impact on the war with the Whisperers. Mostly in that it rallies the Whisperers to attack in full force, which obviously did not happen in the show. He did mention that he might have another calling, so the door is kind of left open for him to make another escape in season 10.
So you go back. Then what?
I will let you know when I know.
Next up is Alden and Luke, who has not one, not three, but two hands. Must be where he got his nickname from.
Alden. Hey, two-hand Luke. How you doing?
Worried about Jesus, Daryl, and the others, Michonne forms her own team and goes after them. This is why at the end of the mid-season finale, they suddenly just appear in the graveyard for no reason. However, after Eugene's search party has gone almost a day, and Michonne's for several hours, Tara and some others decide to send groups out looking for them. One of those pairs is Alden, who agrees to take Luke with him. While out searching, they find the most advanced zombie ever. They also find a trail of arrows, and while following that, it leads them right into a trap.
It's a trap!
Feeling a bit cocky from his earlier win over the zombie shoe, Luke says he'll take out the walker in their path.
Right, kid, don't get penisy!
Only to find themselves quickly surrounded. Their trail stops here as Alpha shows up, pulls out a shotgun, and takes them both prisoner.
Trail ends here.
Alrighty, so this one's a bit tricky. In the comics, there's two separate encounters with the Whisperers, just like AMC had, except in the comics, they're flipped from what AMC's done. To fully make sense, I need to kind of cover Daryl's part first, so we'll get into this a bit later. The main story of this episode follows Daryl and Michonne's groups. This picks up right where the mid-season finale left off, with them fighting the Whisperers in the graveyard. They make their escape only to run into another group of Whisperers who take their chase a bridge too far. It's here that Lydia is captured and taken back to the hilltop for interrogation. Back at the hilltop, Lydia is placed in a cell near Henry where Michonne and Tara get the first try. Not giving up any information though, Daryl comes up with a plan using his new sidekick Henry. He goes to her cell after the burial of Jesus and tells her there's an angry mob waiting up there that would love to tear her apart. Henry gets involved, telling Daryl to stop it, at which point he locks her back up and storms off.
I'm Lydia.
This scenario ends with Lydia opening up to Henry and Daryl listening in from above ground. As mentioned earlier, the comics have two groups that encounter the Whisperers, similar to how AMC's done. AMC's version had Rosita and Eugene go out, with Eugene getting injured and having to hide. The comics has two men named Ken and Marco. In AMC's version, Daryl goes after Eugene with Jesus and Aaron. Jesus is killed in the fight with the Whisperers, and they capture one named Lydia on their way back. The comic version of this, though, has a man named Dante and two others go out to rescue Ken. Arriving at the barn, Ken was left. They actually never find him, but instead are met with a group of walkers with Whisperers mixed in, similar to how Daryl's group was attacked. The biggest difference being is that all of them except Dante is killed. Being the lone survivor, he is taken captive by Alpha, giving the Whisperers their second prisoner. The second group that goes out is Jesus along with three others. Similar to the show, a patrol goes missing and a party goes out searching for him. This isn't a rescue party, but more of a search party since they don't know where he's at or what shape he's in. Kinda like how Alden and Luke weren't going out to rescue Michonne and the others, but were just searching for them since they've been missing for several hours. This search is led by Jesus after he finds out one of his Hilltop's northern patrols hasn't checked in for some time. Their search takes them far outside their borders, and this is where they get attacked by the Whisperers. The two men are killed and a third is gravely wounded before the Whisperers are defeated.
Where you do not belong.
It's also here that Lydia is captured.
Please don't kill me.
Jesus gets back to Hilltop with the injured and his captive, who has since passed out from blood loss. What's interesting though is that it's now he just notices she's human when he looks down and sees the stitches on the back of the mask. This is in contrast to AMC's version where Daryl unmasked her right away when she was captured. Like in the show, Lydia is taken to the cells under Hilltop to be interrogated.
The skins made him leave us alone. They protected us, so we protected them.
This is done only by Jesus initially and is much less harsh than Daryl's method. During this time, Maggie is bringing Carl down to the cells to be locked up after an incident with some other kids. AMC's version had Henry in this role after an incident with some other kids lands him in a cell, though the comic version, Carl is put down there after nearly killing some kids who attacked Sophia. Maggie happens to walk by and sees Jesus talking to her. She asks what's going on and sees the mask he's holding. When hearing that Lydia was part of a group that looked like walkers that talk, she quickly pulls Jesus away to tell him what happened with Marco. This leaves Lydia and Carl down there alone, but unlike the AMC version, it's Lydia who starts the conversation with him. Now, I won't go too much into what they talked about since that'll probably be covered in the next episode, but there are some things I'd like to point out. AMC has Lydia as a very scared, sniveling, crying little girl, terrified of Daryl and the others, and quite often get caught in lies. The comic Lydia is much more bold and strong. She's much more upfront and honest about who she is and her group. Carl is also held for a much shorter time than Henry. In fact, he's only down there for maybe a couple hours while Maggie verifies his attack was in self-defense. The last inspiration I'll mention that AMC used from the comics was Rosita being pregnant. In the comics, she's actually with Eugene, but things aren't going well for the two of them. Same as the show, Eugene finds out she's pregnant and he's not the father.
You are not.
However, she's the one to tell him and he says it doesn't matter, he'll still help raise it like they'll be a family. So what did you think of the return of The Walking Dead? Did it give you that kind of feeling like... Let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, give it a share, thumbs up, all that good stuff. And until next time, keep on whispering. In the comics, there's actually... No. She asks what's going on and sees the mask. Something else AMC changed is on his return, Dwight actually sees Dwight. Kind of like this one right here.